Hi everyone, my name is Risha and welcome to Remodel Minority. For today's video, the VPP team is conducting an interview with Jollene Levid from AF3IRM, and she's going to answer all of your questions about activism and organizing, and we can't wait for you to hear what she has to say. So let's get into it. Hi Jolene, my name is Andrea.
My name is Cindy.
I'm Risha.
And I'm Jalen. We are the Monsoon VPP team, and we are so excited that you agreed to join us today. So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jollene Levid. I am the founding chairperson of AF3IRM, which is a transnational feminist women of color organization. I've been in it for 18 years. And then I've been a union organizer for the last 17 years. I'm currently a union organizer with United Teachers Los Angeles. Based in Los Angeles, and I'm a parent, and I like chocolate and books.
Thank you, Jolene. Can you tell us about what else AF3IRM does, and just give us more information about what AF3IRM is?
Sure. So AF3IRM was founded in 1989, and it has 3 campaign areas. One is fighting for, with, as immigrant women and girls. Another is fighting against trafficking. And then the third area is fighting militarism in all of its forms, including the police occupation of our communities. So those are the 3 kind of large campaign areas, and then depending on what part of, where you are geographically, it just looks differently. So for example, our Hawaii chapter has military bases on the islands, and so their campaign against militarism looks different than ours in Los Angeles, where a lot of the work we do is basically against police violence by the LAPD. We also have a chapter in Puerto Rico, so they look different too because they're basically a colony of the United States, similar to Hawaii. And then we have budding chapters in the Twin Cities, all over California, the West Coast, Seattle, just all over the place. So that's a little bit of our work. It's also really important that we're an organization specifically for women and girl identified people. Women of color, actually. So that's a little bit of background about AF3IRM.
All right, so can you walk us through what a day in your life looks like?
Sure. So currently during the pandemic, I wake up around between 5:30 and 6, and I try to exercise and I try to read for fun. And then I get ready, and my kindergartner, my child, gets up around 7:30. Then it's prepping him for kindergarten, getting him on Zoom, and then turning, and literally in our apartment, he has a little table in the corner, and then I'm at the dining table where I am right now, and trying to do my work while he's on kindergarten Zoom. I typically work between 8 and 12 hours a day. In the evenings, I do community meetings, and I'm not good at cooking, but I like to eat. So there's that part of my day. And then every time I get a little bit of an opening, I like to read fiction. That's pretty much a snapshot of my day. The little one is asleep by 9. And so I get a little bit of cushion time in the evening for myself, and then repeat. So that's pandemic organizing. That's what it looks like right now.
So you do a lot of work at AF3IRM. What made you start becoming an advocate?
Actually, I was actually older. I think I was older when I became politicized. So meeting with you all is actually an inspiration. I actually didn't become politicized until I was in the end of my first year of college. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and then I went to school in Orange County, which is only an hour away, but it's a different world. It's one of the few Republican counties in California. It's extremely wealthy. There's a huge, very visible gap between rich and poor, and people were just racist. I think I was in a bubble. I don't know. I grew up and frankly, maybe 80% of my classmates were Latino. And I grew up in the largest enclave of Filipinos in the US. So when I went to college and realized that everything that I was seeing on the news is actually real life, which I think that you all see a lot more than I did, it forced me to find community. And you know, everything from people telling me to learn English, to actually, while I was in college, the Iraq War was formally declared. And so I got kind of swept up in that, but we were actually really fighting hard for relevant education. I didn't understand why, you know, you could learn French and Italian at school, but you couldn't learn Filipino studies. There were Vietnamese students at my university that we were working with, and we were so close to Little Saigon, but you couldn't take one Vietnamese language class at UC Irvine, which was like one of the largest, most concentrated Vietnamese American student populations in the country. So we got swept up in the relevant education. Then I found what was going to be a firm because they were doing a political fashion show nearby, highlighting impacts on women. And then from there, it was, I went to the Philippines, I got trained as an organizer there, I came back and I kept organizing, and it just became my whole life.
You mentioned like being in a bubble, and right now we see a lot of API activism. So I was wondering, as an API activist, why is it so important for us as APIs and youth to step up and actually get involved in our communities and fight for these issues that are affecting us?
I think it's particularly important for us as APIs to be involved because there's a myth that the dominant society is trying to teach us, trying to get us to internalize, which is that we're closer to whiteness and we're more protected because we are like quote model minority or whatever they want to call it, whatever that myth that they're trying to sell us. But when you're actually moving around in this world, you don't feel those privileges. And I think that they are trying to sell us on that, right? They're trying to get us to buy into this notion that we have some sort of access to whiteness and the privilege that it grants people, when we all know from our daily experiences and our parents' experiences and our grandparents' experiences that that's not the case. And I think they purposely try to keep us from our own histories for the same reason, right? So they're saying, okay, Vietnamese American, Filipino American, other Southeast Asians, other South Asians here in the US, you're actually closer to whiteness, you know, model minority. But then when we actually study our own histories, we see actually our families' countries are what the US invaded. So I think that us being part of the movement for economic justice, for racial justice, could be a turning point for the overall mass movements. If we're not involved, we're not going to win. So I think that's our role as APIs in social justice movements.
And on that same note, what struggles have you personally faced in terms of organizing, in terms of activism, in terms of like a firm's early days? What was the main struggle that you felt like you overcame?
I think the main struggle is that largely people don't understand why women and girls, women identified people, girl identified people need their own organizing space. A lot of people think that our issues are, quote, secondary. They're not as important. That they're like soft issues, right? If you talk about domestic violence, like, oh, yeah, I get why that could be important, but we have to talk about the larger fight for racial justice. We have to talk about the larger fight for fair wages for workers. So I think at the core of all of our struggles has been asserting that what we're doing is important for everybody winning. I think both inside and outside the movement, people don't think that we deserve our own vehicle for struggle.
How does a firm work towards at combating those issues?
So we are not a nonprofit. We're all volunteer. We don't get grants. We don't have we don't build programming that's funded. And in a lot of ways, it makes it harder. But in a lot of ways, we're not tied to the same rules that a lot of organizations are. So there's a lot. So we have schools of women's and schools of youth activism across the country. So that's popular education. And then for our political practice, for example, when we're talking about fighting trafficking, for example, the last thing that we did here in Los Angeles was this campaign called Survivors Not Criminals. And what was happening in LA was the police and the county were entering massage parlors where there was trafficking, but they were also picking up the trafficking victims and putting them in jail, right? It was like these sweeps, and they would end up either in jail or with ICE. So our huge campaign the last few years, which we actually recently won, was ending their criminalization. So so say LAPD finds out about some trafficking ring and they go into these massage parlors and they raid them, the women that are picked up, they're not treated as criminals and placed with the traffickers. They're actually given options for services, trauma-informed services, housing. They're given the opportunity, if they want to apply for trafficking visas so that they can stay and they're not beholden to their quote employers. So that's an example of kind of on the ground what a campaign would look like. So we won that one in January after 2 years. Yeah.
Your work is very inspiring and like aspirational to a lot of API youth and API women in general and the API community. So I was wondering if you have any role models that you would share with us?
I do. I think that, so one of my mentors is Ninochka Roska. She actually was the founder of our organization in 1989. She is a former political prisoner under the Marcos dictatorship in the Philippines. And before she got imprisoned the second time, she actually fled and came here with asylum. She's a novelist, and she's just, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but she's kind of just a badass, like. So I think that everyone could have a mentor like that, and then we pick up mentors and teachers along the way, and then you could outgrow them too. I think that that's also a key thing. Sometimes you outgrow your mentor, but in all my most important work, there's always been a woman, regardless of age, that has been either a guide or like a partner or a comrade during the work or throughout the work. I don't think that anyone can ever do it alone, per se. So that's one of my mentors.
I think that's great, and that's honestly like really inspiring to hear. I know that activism can be really hard at times and that it can be a lot of struggles, but do you have a favorite part of activism that you really like to see or really like to do?
Yes, that's a great question. So my favorite thing is recruiting new folks who have never been politicized or involved in anything before. And I think it's at the heart of every movement. You're not going to grow unless you recruit new people. I try to stay away from discussions of, like for example, Jolene's not political enough, so she doesn't belong here, or she hasn't read enough, so she doesn't belong here. We all started somewhere, and every single time one person joins, it's like a huge victory, I think. They say that every revolution begins with one conversation. And so who's having those conversations? How can you and I become those people in those discussions? I think that's the role of every organizer.
That's great. So when you do recruit these new people, is there any advice that you give them first when they're starting out and being politicized, or when they want to become activists? What do you tell them?
I say to read. I say to find a buddy. It doesn't have to be a mentor if you don't have a mentor, but find a buddy. Definitely, before all of this, you should join an organization or a collective, something. Join something, because you can't engage in struggle as an individual. So join something. What else? Oh, I say share your ideas. Every person that comes into organizing has their own experience, and they enhance our movement overall. So don't be afraid to share, even if you're like the new person in the room. In fact, we probably need to hear what you have to say. Rest. So I need to take my own advice a little bit better, but rest. And then I think that it's important that people find what they're good at and make sure that they do that, because it'll bring them joy while they're organizing. So we have musicians, we have people that love to write, we have people who like to do the organizing, but like everybody will have a role in the movement. And then also, in addition to that, try to learn what other people are good at. So I can't sing, I can dance, but like singing is like, but I'll engage in, when people write songs for our protests and things like that, I'll still do it, because even though I'm not good at it, I'm like the worst. It's important that we still continue to learn. Once we stop learning things, then our movement becomes static. So that's what I would tell someone that's new.
And it's really clear that you are an amazing activist, and a lot of us look up to you. So we really just wanted to thank you for spending your evening and your afternoon with us, and just like answering all our questions, because activism is so important to all of us. So we really just appreciate your time and just like all of your advice.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's really good to meet you all. I wish I got to meet you in Iowa.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you for inviting me. Bye.
Thank you.